How's your week been? 1 week closer to the summer holidays, isn't it? You must be looking forward to that. Hopefully, you're going to get some really nice weather. We've had some nice days, but it would be really good to have lots of lovely sunshiny days for your summer holidays. Well, last Sunday, we had the story of the three men in the fire, and it was acted out by those children. I thought it was really good fun. This week, we're going to come on to a story that I think you'll know really, really well. But I thought I'd tell you a story about maybe a lion that you don't know really, really well. This lion was called Christian. And the story is set way back in 1969. That's a long, long time ago. And it's a true story. Two young men found a little lion cub in a shop. And the shop is one that's very well known throughout the world. It was Harrods. Now, this little lion had been born in captivity. And you know, in those days, in 1969, you could sell lion cubs to people. It's a terrible idea. But nonetheless, these two young men, bought the lion cub. And they called him Christian. Now, the little lion cub lived with them in London, which is not a good place for a lion, but they loved the lion cub. And they kept him and they took him round to see other friends and they looked after him just like a pet. But I'm delighted to say that they soon realised that it wasn't right for them to keep the little lion cub, not in a flat in London. So they went to find out if there was a place they could release him into the wild safely. And they did. They found a place that was run by two British people, the Adamsons. And they took the journey all the way over to Africa, and they took their little lion cub, who they had loved very much, and they said, please release him in the wild, but take care of him. And the Adamsons agreed that that's what they would do. Well, the two men waited for some years, and then they thought they missed Christian so much, they'd like to find out what was happening in his life. So they flew out to Africa again. And when they got to the compound, they asked about Christian. And Mr. Adamson said, yes, he's around and he has a pride of lionesses as well. And he said, I'll take you down and maybe you'll be able to see him out in the wild. So the two men went to the part of Africa where Christian the lion, the big grown-up lion, was now living. And if you go online, if you go to YouTube, you'll see what happens. It's a lovely story because Christian, the lion, the big grown-up lion, remembers the two men. He remembers the love that they showed him, and he remembers that he loved them when he was a little cub. And he comes up to them and puts his paws on their shoulders, and you can tell that he's remembering them and loving them. And then he goes to get his pride of lionesses to bring them to show the two men. It's a lovely story, and it's a very, very unusual story about a lion, isn't it? Because that's not what we think lions do at all. We don't think they love human beings. They're more likely to fight them, aren't they? And I think by now you'll know what the Bible story about Daniel is, won't you? So I expect you've guessed. This is about Daniel in the lion's den, isn't it? But what's important is why was Daniel in the lion's den? And what happened after Daniel came out of the lion's den? Now I've got my Bible here and it has the Daniel story. Now it starts with a new king. The king was called Darius. And Darius was relying on Daniel a lot because Daniel, remember, was wise and thought about things and looked after the palace and the court and became very important. And Darius relied on Daniel more and more to give him advice and to help him. In fact, Darius wanted to put Daniel in charge of all the other governors. Now, the other governors weren't too keen on that at all because they didn't want to be ruled over by anybody. So they thought of a plot. And the way they thought was they knew that Daniel was a follower of God. They knew that every day Daniel prayed to God to give him wisdom and grace for the rest of the day. So they wrote out a decree and they took it to Darius and they said, I think you should sign this to say that because you're such an important king, that nobody should pray to anyone else but you. I think that would show the rest of the country, all the people, just how important you are. So just sign here. And Darius made a big mistake. He thought he wanted to keep those governors on his side, so he did sign it. And of course, what happened? Well, Daniel knew about what had been written and signed. Did he change his way of praying? No, he did not. In fact, Daniel went home and he opened his windows wide and he sat in front of his open window and he prayed to God just like he always had. And he let everybody see that he was still praying to his God. Well, of course, for the governors, that was exactly what they'd been looking forward to. So they brought Daniel to Darius and said, look, he's been praying to his God. Now you've signed this special piece of paper and you can't do anything about that. You've signed it, and at the bottom it said that if anybody did actually pray to anybody other than you, they'd get thrown in a lion's den. You have to do what you signed. And Darius did have to do what he'd signed because it was his signature and it was his seal. But he didn't want to do it at all because a little bit of Darius was wondering about Daniel's God already. However, Darius, with a very heavy heart, said to Daniel, I have to put you in the lion's den. You have to, I don't know what you're going to do, but I will pray for your God to do something. And Daniel said, don't worry, my God will look after me. So Daniel was put in a pit with lions prowling round about him. And then they sealed the top of the pit and they said, we will come back in the morning. Darius went away off to his room and I don't think he slept a wink all night. And when the morning broke, he ran down to the lion's den and he had them pick up the big stone that had kept Daniel in the pit. And he shouted down, Daniel, Daniel, are you there? And Daniel looked up and smiled. And all the lions were lying round about him, asleep. And he said, I told you my God would look after me. I had no doubt. And what happened was the Lord sent angels to shut the lions' mouths. And look, they're all here and I haven't got a scratch on me. Darius was amazed and he said, I make a decree that in every dominion of my kingdom men must tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom is the one which shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall endure to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. And so the story of Daniel in the lion's den is amazing, that the lions never scratched Daniel, never harmed him at all. But what's wonderful is what came out of the end of that story, that Darius understood that Daniel's God, our God, is more wonderful than we can ever imagine, and that he does work miracles. And that's what happened to Daniel. And those governors who had been plotting against him, well, they would soon get their comeuppance, because Darius wasn't going to trust them anymore, because they had tricked him and they had tried to get rid of a very good man who had done no harm to anyone. Now, for each one of us, we sometimes have lions prowling round us, not real lions, but sometimes we have things that worry us. Maybe we sometimes think, I'm not good enough at school, or my friends don't like me anymore, or sometimes we just get anxious about things. And that's a little bit like being in a lion's den, like Daniel. Do you know, if you have any of those worries or fears or feeling anxious, you think of them like a lion, that God can come and shut their mouths and they can stop whispering in your ear the things that make you worried. We can all dare to be a Daniel. We can pray to God and say, help me when I'm anxious. Help me when I'm frightened. Help me when I maybe feel alone sometimes. You can be Daniel in a lion's den, and those lions won't have anything to do with you. Their mouths will be shut, and you will be able to be happy in the mornings. See you next week.